Excellent. Well, welcome everybody. My name is Scott Eisner. I'm the president of the U.S. Africa Business Center here at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and it's a distinct honor today to be partnering with the Presidential Precinct Network, with the Yali Forum, with folks like William & Mary and our corporate members such as Coca-Cola, Caterpillar, UPS, and others, to welcome you to the pinnacle of the U.S. business community here in Washington at the Chamber. Things like this don't come along as often as they probably should, where a very diverse group of people get together, have the opportunity to share ideas, to talk about what the future is going to look like, to figure out what leadership looks like in a modern era. These probably should happen more often. I was chatting with our friends from Chevron, Renato, who you'll meet later today, who commented, this is probably the easiest opportunity for those of you who are part of the Yali program to actually get together due to the limitations on visas and passports and other travel throughout the continent. And to have these opportunities is really unique and a defining moment for what your careers are going to look like. Here at the Chamber, representing 3 million businesses across the United States and scores of African companies that are interested in partnering with the U.S., you really are the apex of what we need. Thoughtful leadership, decision makers, people who are willing to put their necks out and take a risk in this modern, crazy world that we all live in, to come together for a unifying cause, which is bettering your countries, your continents, your business communities. So it's something that we truly believe strongly here at the Chamber. Entrepreneurship is the future of this country, and it's the future of the world. It's the SMEs that are going to be driving our economy future. It's definitely what's driving the African economies forward. And to see you all come together to understand in your portal what civic leadership is all about, how do you engage at all levels, is truly a motivation for us as we sit in Washington kind of judging the world as we often do. But it's very much motivation. We'll walk away from today understanding kind of that our future is beyond maybe what we see across the street in the White House or the chaos of Cleveland or what will definitely be equal chaos of Philadelphia in the coming weeks. And as we move beyond our presidential circus, as it definitely is this year, to see what real leadership looks like. And that is all of you today. So I want to thank Neil Piper, who's not here today. He's kind of the kid in charge in many ways, the presidential precinct. He had 2 children recently at the same time called twins. Having had one recently, I can only imagine what 2 is doing to his psyche today. We've got Nancy Hopkins from the precinct, who's done an amazing job working with Madison Abood on my team, making sure that today's event comes across well, that you all find as much value in today as our member companies will. Jim Murray, also with the precinct, Steve from William & Mary, and then our connector and all connectors, Francois Baird, who, if you haven't met this gentleman yet and you're interested in all things South Africa, he's quite the networker. So if you want to understand how it's done, go talk to Francois, who's back in the corner. So thank you for giving us this opportunity today. I'm going to turn the podium over to our friends, but I do want to just say on behalf of the business community, this building, our membership network, for those of you in the Yali program, is part of your network now. Make sure you tap into us as you go back to your countries and think about what your futures are going to be, as you think about incubating careers, as you think about doing startups. Really do lean on us in the business community here in the United States. We represent, as I said, 3 million businesses. That ranges from mom and pop organizations, small little shops out in California and Iowa, in the middle of America, all the way through large corporations that employ tens, if not hundreds of thousands of individuals. So do look at the Chamber, look at our family, look at our resources as part of your resources as you move beyond today. We want to be part of your future. We want to be part of your lives. We want to be part of your success. And so please do think of the U.S. business community as a partner in that. Without further ado, I think I'm turning it over to Jim, I believe. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Scott. Good morning and welcome. I'm Jim Murray, and as Scott suggested, Nancy Hopkins and I are standing in for Neil Piper, who's taking care of those twins. The presidential precinct is, and I'm saying this for the business folks in the room who may not be as familiar, the presidential precinct is a collaboration between the University of Virginia, the College of William & Mary, Thomas Jefferson's Monticello, James Madison's Montpelier, and James Monroe's Highland, as well as Morven, a property of the University of Virginia. At the precinct, our mission is to bring together leaders with business leaders from around the world, or leaders, civic leaders, business leaders from around the world, with business leaders here, with academics, with civil society people, policymakers. And the idea is to discuss and collaborate around issues of civil society, the rule of law, nation building, and economic development. I'd like to thank, in particular, those of you from the business community who are here today. I appreciate you've got busy schedules. These young people that you're going to meet today are worth the time you're taking. If I could generalize for our African guests, what you have here today are senior representatives of some of the largest, most influential businesses in the world, as well as people who have experience at the World Bank, the U.S. Trade Representative, and so on. Why are they here? Well, in the simplest terms, they're here to meet you. They're here to meet. I know the Africans here from personal observation, and I can say to the business people in the room, you are worth meeting. But of course, there's more to it than that. As in any kind of interaction, there are some interests that are self-serving. And what interests might those be? Well, for our African guests, you get to meet potential investors in your country and maybe even potential employers. You get to meet potential civic or business partners, or maybe you just make a new friend. But the self-interest of the businesses represented here may also be found in for the businesses who represent here, you may find in your self-interest making a valuable local in-country contact, having an expert on the ground, have somebody to make an introduction, or simply to build brand awareness with people who at home in their countries are influential and looked up to. So both parties have something to gain. But there's a third thing happening here as well. And there's more here today than capitalist self-interest, if you will. There's a recognition that we're all citizens in common on the same planet. Half a dozen years ago, two experts on international affairs wrote a critically acclaimed book called Fixing Failing States. The book begins with these words: "We have a collective problem. 40 to 60 states, home to nearly 2 billion people, are either sliding backwards or teetering on the brink of implosion or have already collapsed. With one half of the globe, we have created an almost seamless web of political, financial, and technological connections that underpin democratic states and market-based economies, while the other half is blocked from political stability and participation in global wealth. Within some of these countries, vicious networks of criminality, violence, and drugs feed on disenfranchised populations in uncontrolled territory. In a period of unprecedented wealth and invention, people throughout parts of Africa, Central Asia, Latin America, and the Middle East are locked into lives of misery without a stake in their countries or any certainty about or control over their futures." Now, that may seem an overly harsh description of a bifurcated world, but you African visitors may correct, and some of you African visitors may say, well, that doesn't describe my country. But we only need to look at the refugee crisis in Europe, in Northern Africa, in the Middle East, and yes, even here on the American-Mexican border, to understand and recognize that mankind, all of us together, have something to gain by solving the economic disparities between countries. In the broadest sense, we're here because working together to solve these issues is in the best interest of all of us as members of the human race. So the issues we're about to talk about today are immensely important. I hope that you all, like me, are looking forward to learning about them. And now let me introduce the Vice President for International Affairs at the College of William & Mary, my colleague, Steve Hanson.
Thank you so much, Jim, for those eloquent, moving remarks, actually. I am, as Jim said, Steve Hanson, Vice Provost for International Affairs at William & Mary, and William & Mary is extremely honored and proud to be part of the Presidential Precinct Network. You've heard the members. I just wanted to mention, for those who hadn't heard this, Forbes recently had its college rankings come out. And the top 2 public universities in the country, according to Forbes, are the University of Virginia and the College of William & Mary. Now, they got one thing wrong, which was UVA was number 1 and William & Mary was number 2, so we could debate that ranking later. But I gotta say, it's pretty amazing to have in the presidential precinct, the 1-2 punch, as it were, of top public universities in the country. That plus the intellectual resources of our presidential sites makes this a really powerful new network that we hope will do good in the world. And this is such an important part of our work together. And we're really, really thrilled that the Chamber as well has come to support this event. And so many of you have come to join us for what, as was said earlier, is a really important discussion. I did want to mention, too, about William & Mary something that not everyone might know, which is that Africa has become an increasingly important focus for us. We are actually now one of the few universities with 4 historians of Africa, for example, covering all regions of the continent as well as all time periods. We have a new Center for African Development that was established last year, which has some significant funding from the Gates Foundation to look at issues like the distribution of cell phones and women's empowerment, if they have the access to, for example, financial tools that one can get on a cell phone. And that research is going on in Tanzania right now with William & Mary students. We have a very major project with USAID known as Aid Data, which is the world's biggest database of aid flows around the world. It's public access, and Africa is the major focus of that project. We just learned this week that we are a provisional winner of a $1.3 million grant from PEPFAR, the HIV/AIDS program, and we'll be working in both Uganda and Zambia on that project to use some of these data analysis tools to help fight the HIV/AIDS epidemic in those countries. We're just engaged in Africa more than ever. In fact, our study abroad group from Cape Town I think they came back, or they just came back. Sylvia Mittendorfer, I want to point out, is our Director of Global Education who's in charge of our study abroad programs. And so we're also expanding our student access to Africa. So forgive the plug, but we are just really, really thrilled that we can connect with something that's very near and dear to us. I'd like to quickly give you a few pointers about the time coming up here, because time is so short. We have, as you see, a very compressed program, and our goal here is to get everyone's questions in, but it may not always be possible, as you see, in the time span allotted for there to be a lot of audience questions at the end of each panel. We'll try to do that if we work as quickly as we can, but what we wanted to emphasize is that there is the networking lunch. So any questions you have for panelists or participants, we have that time together to kind of follow up with things you may hear during the session that you didn't have a chance to go through in depth. And let me now go ahead and introduce the first panel, which is going to be wonderful. It's on the topic of business in Africa, time to get serious. And let me first introduce the chair. He's coming up now. He was referenced earlier, the master networker, Francois Baird. He is the chairman of Africa at Edelman and the founder of Baird's US. His bio is in the program, so you can read about his many accomplishments, but let me just say he's a wonderful board member of the Presidential Precinct and a good friend. Francois, why don't you introduce the first panel?